Hello, everybody, and welcome for week number 0 of the NCAA football season. I'm going to be your host today, Sean PSU Fans to Newsham. Joining me today for the lovely week 0 slate that we have upon us this weekend is Alex Fearmyturtle Hardin. Alex, how are you doing today?
Hey, Sean, going well. Yeah, you all have to live with me this week 0. We get the regulars back in next week. But yeah, we have 6-game slate on DK to break down, so it should be an interesting one. I'm not sure how good the football will be, but it's football and the fall is near, so happy about that.
Unfortunately for you guys, you will have to wait for week 1 for the debut of me and Ben on a show together again. And an actual full season of Ben and I on a show together, where I'm sure Ben will have some terrible takes and I will try to talk some sense into him. So we'll have to see how that goes over the course of the season.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure how corporate signed off on that agreement. I think there's an HR trip in someone's future. So
I'm guessing someone was just sick of Ben's takes that are terrible, and they just really didn't want to see them anymore. That would be my guess. I mean, I don't know any other option there, but no, should be fun. Me and Ben and Chop will be back next week for the midweek show going forward. So we're gonna look at today's 6-game slate on DraftKings. Then we'll briefly touch on anything on Fanduel that might be relevant as well for you guys. This is the only show this week. There's no show Saturday morning in case you guys were watching this and looking for that as well. We will be back with 2 shows starting next week for week number 1. Week 0, there was just not enough games to really justify doing that. All right, first game on the slate. We actually start out really hot here with Austin Peay versus Western Kentucky. We just got lines last night. The total in this game is 66. Western Kentucky is a 21.5-point favorite. So the team totals are around 43 for Western Kentucky and then 22 for Austin Peay. We'll start on the Austin Peay side of things here. The only person to me that really makes sense is Dre McCray. He was a guy that really got volume last year, even as a freshman. He's coming back into his sophomore season here. And this is a guy that we saw put up pretty good stat lines last year, had some really good volume. We expect them to be trailing. They're going to have to move the ball to some extent based on what we're seeing with the line. And McCray would be a really good option in that situation because he'll likely get fed. Quarterback situation, it's an or situation as of now. So they have Sheldon Lehman and DeLello, the transfer from Middle Tennessee State, here as the options. We are expecting Lehman to start, but it's a 60-40 spot as of right now. What's your thoughts on the Austin Peay situation, Alex?
Yeah, like you said, McCray is clearly one of the best plays on the slate. He had a really good freshman year. Going to be the top receiver on the team. Western Kentucky's defense is not great, so it sets up a good situation where we get some back and forth action. I think Josh Samuel at running back is kind of interesting. He has some talent. He actually used to play for Western Kentucky, then had a season at Jacksonville State, I believe. Now at Austin Peay. He should be their lead back, but CJ Evans will be pretty involved. Outside of McCray, I think James Burns is kind of interesting at 3.1 just because we know he's kind of a wind sprinter. Like he'll probably get some targets down the field. He used to play at Miami of Ohio. He was in play on some action slates. So I think he's at least interesting. It's kind of a shame that we don't get a clear-cut starting quarterback for Austin Peay because I would be interested in just like in stacking up that game completely. And actually, I might even take a few shots on Lehman if we get word that he's the starter in the larger field tournaments. But for me, it's mostly going to be focused around McCray.
For sure. All right, moving over to Western Kentucky. We do not have a depth chart for Western Kentucky and do not expect to get one. We have done quite a bit of research on what we think is going to happen. So, Alex, why don't you explain what you think the Western Kentucky situation will be?
Yeah, they have some depth at receiver, which makes it interesting. We're pretty sure Corley's going to run in the slot and be the primary target getter for the team, and then Daywood's going to be out wide, running downfield, running a bunch of 9 routes. So I think those two are the safest in terms of production. But they have plenty of other options. Joshua Simon's like a massive tight end who has pretty good hands. He got injured in the first game last year. He had 2 productive seasons before that. He's certainly going to be involved. Western Kentucky doesn't run like a full raid. Like a lot of times they will run some like 11 personnel where they have 2 tight ends on the field. Simon certainly is going to run a lot of routes. So he's pretty interesting. Then you have like the Western Michigan transfer, Jalen Hall, who's also going to be on the outside. Likely. He's explosive. He has big play potential. And they even have other options like Dalvin Smith, who moved from tight end to receiver. If he plays a lot, he's a great option at 3.5. And like just to have depth behind that, like Michael Matheson was another MAC transfer. So, I mean, there's a lot of options. Corley and Daywood are going to be two of the highest owned receivers, especially Daywood at that price. But there's places to get different. What do you think about?
Yeah, so I think Austin Reed's definitely the top quarterback on the slate. Am I expecting him to be Bailey Zappi reincarnated? No, but I do expect him to throw the ball. We know this offense is going to throw the ball. He did play one game last year, and he was very productive in that game. He's got the safest floor on the slate, probably the highest ceiling, because there's no real mobile quarterbacks other than Jordan Travis, and he's going to be in a blowout. So I think that Reed's the best quarterback by a pretty significant margin. So to follow up what you were talking about, the discussions thus far in camp have been that Corley is going to end up in the Stearns role and David Davis is going to end up in the Tinsley role. Do we expect the same sort of production from what we saw last year? No. However, especially Daywood, like you said, Daywood's priced at 4,800. People are going to be very high on Daywood. I expect him to be one of the most high-owned receivers on the slate. Following up on GPP purposes, like you said, we're pretty sure they're going to run effectively running back with like Robichaux, but they do have Jakari Moses and other options there as well at running back. And don't expect tons of carries for them, but they might be involved to some extent in the pass game. And then we expect to see basically two wides, out wide, a slot, and then a tight end / a slot. So basically the outside receivers for this team are going to be Daywood. It's going to be Jalen Hall and Dalvin Smith. So like realistically, those three guys are going to occupy two spots. Then in the middle, it's going to be Josh Simon, Matheson, Stearns, and Corley. So we're expecting Corley to absorb one of those roles and then the other three to sort of split a little bit. Now that said, they could run some 5 wide as well. So some of these guys in GPP purposes especially are really good GPP plays. Like you said, Jalen Hall out wide, I don't think as many people will touch him, but we know he's explosive and could get some run there. And then you're looking at like Dalvin Smith is a converted tight end, and then Josh Simon. Like these two guys caught 14 balls last year, and that resulted in 7 touchdowns. So like these guys are guys that can go and score a touchdown for the team. So I do like a lot of the Western Kentucky guys. And to me, this is the clear best offense to attack on the slate. We know what they're going to do. We know how they play. We know where production typically will go for them. So definitely like a lot of the Western Kentucky pieces for Saturday. Moving to the next game, Nebraska and Northwestern. Alex, why don't you lead off here? We'll talk about Nebraska and the changes that we're going to see with the Cornhuskers this year.
Yeah, so Nebraska brings in Mark Whipple from Pitt. So they will probably throw a bit more than last year. They'll still have some involvement from the running backs, but I expect the offense to at least be more interesting. And they have a few transfers really that are vying for that like coveted wide receiver 1 role in a Mark Whipple offense. Usually there's a lot of volume funneled to the top receiver like Addison last year. Trey Palmer is most likely to have that role, but it's possible that Omar Manning could establish himself that. So like we get a situation where Palmer is going to be much higher owned than Manning. So it sets up a nice pivot spot for their Nebraska wide receiver. Further down, Marcus Washington, a Texas transfer, he's likely to get the start as the 3rd wide receiver, but they have some depth. They have 3 or 4 other guys who are probably going to rotate in, but he's only 3,800. So he's certainly in play. And in terms of quarterback, I do like Casey Thompson, but he's just one of like the 4 quarterbacks probably in play for cash games this week, but there's a lot of question marks still to see how this offense actually plays out, especially going overseas and playing the game in Ireland. But Northwestern was pretty poor last year, especially on the ground. So maybe Nebraska finds success on the ground and runs a bit more than we expect, but Thompson's still a good option.
Yeah, so for me, looking at the running backs, for those unfamiliar with the Pitt situation last year, it was a dumpster fire. They basically ran 4 guys, split 4 guys pretty evenly, and it was nothing you really want to touch. As of now, that's how I'm approaching the Nebraska backfield. I will note that Ramir Johnson is playing out of the slot to some extent, so take that into consideration. But yeah, for me, apparently Palmer, everything we've seen indicated in the camp thus far has been Palmer has differentiated and separated himself as the go-to slot. And we've seen Addison, we've seen Maurice French, we saw Isabella when he was at UMass as well for Whipple all produced tremendously in the slot. So Palmer is definitely my favorite option. I will say Marcus Washington came from Texas with Casey Thompson. So with that makes me think that they are friends and that there's a good shot that Marcus Washington will be utilized to some extent at 3,800. I think that's a really realistic option as well. Moving to the Northwestern side of the ball, like Alex said, Northwestern was very poor last year. Evan Hall is very good as a receiving back. However, Cam Porter is back this year, so the backfield very well could be a bit of a split situation here. Helinski is pretty terrible. We looked and expect negative yards rushing from him. And when you get negative yards rushing, that sets you behind quite a bit in terms of where you start your floor at for the day. And he's not a guy that's going to throw the ball wild. So I don't really love much on Northwestern. Is there anyone that you like a bit more than me here?
Yeah, I mean, the only reason really to play Northwestern guys, in my opinion, is to kind of differentiate yourself and for like a bring back in a Nebraska stack. So if you're playing 3 Nebraska guys, this game probably needs to stay somewhat close. You need some production from the Northwestern side. So someone like Evan Hall, certainly in play. Like you said, it depends on how much they're splitting with Cam Porter. Like Cam Porter had a good freshman year and then missed last year, but I still think it's Evan Hall's job. And like you said, he can catch passes out of the backfield. And last year, he's a pretty stable producer. So we'll see how that kind of plays out. But I'd still play some Hall in tournaments. And then Malik Washington and Bryce Kurtz are probably the 2 receivers that I would play. I would probably limit myself to one of those in any given lineup, just because we don't expect much out of the Northwestern passing game. But I think those are the 2 best receivers on the team.
For sure. All right, moving to the next game, we have Idaho State and UNLV. Just for follow-up on the Nebraska and Northwestern game, total is 50, and Nebraska is a 12.5-point favorite there. Moving into the Idaho State game, UNLV 21.5-point favorite. The total in the game is 51.5. So starting with Idaho State here, what do you see from them? Because I do not see much that I would be considering in any format here.
Yeah, they were really bad at the FCS level last year. And yeah, once you see UNLV as a big favorite against anybody, you probably know they're probably not a good football team. Really, the only person I would even consider touching in tournaments is Raiden Hunter, their running back, who should get some volume, can catch some passes. Saw some good highlight videos of him in camp, but I'm really not interested in much at all on this team. Like, I would be pretty surprised if the GPP winning lineup had anybody from Idaho State in it. Certainly not playing Tyler Vanderwall.
Like you said, the fact that UNLV is a 21-point favorite is not a great look for the other team because UNLV is typically very poor. Moving to that UNLV team, so the quarterback situation is currently in Orr. We think Doug Brumfield is going to start over the transfer from Tennessee, Harrison Bailey. Brumfield is more of a running threat, whereas Bailey is more of a passing threat. Good shot that we're going to see both of them play quite a bit. The real standout here is Aiden Robbins. He's listed as the RB1 for UNLV. We do think it's going to be like a 3-man split between him, Reese, and Magyar. But at 3,300 against a team like Idaho State, that's going to be a very strong play. Similarly to David Davis, I would expect Aiden Robbins to be one of the top owned plays on the slate. I think that he's going to end up being very highly owned. Moving into the receivers, I probably won't touch tons of them except for in GPP. Kyle Williams was established last year. He had a really good year for them. And then someone that I think you want to talk a little bit about is Jeff Weimer, who has been looking really strong in camp thus far.
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy he's a JUCO transfer, and he had like 17 touchdowns and 1,200 yards last year. A lot of the coaching staff loves him. He's going to start. He's interesting. It's a cheap piece. Play is kind of a one-off. I'm not looking to like stack with any of the quarterbacks, but yeah, I think he's probably off the radar for a lot of people. So he's someone I have interested in sprinkling in my lineups, and I'll take some shots on like Courtney Reese as well. So my question for you on this slate, would you consider playing 2 UNLV running backs in the same lineup, or would you kind of max one that situation? Because they are expected to score more points than usual, and they have some cheap running backs.
No, I think it's definitely realistic. I mean, especially with Robbins. Like, if Robbins gets 50 and a touchdown, like that's pretty productive for 3,300. Obviously, you want a bit more from Reese and Magyar, despite the fact you probably would expect it from Robbins. But you're talking like it's a very realistic possibility that any of these guys have 100 plus and 2. And at that price point on all of them, it's very realistic.
Yeah.
So it's definitely something to consider. All right, next game we're moving on to is Wyoming at Illinois. Wyoming is a 10.5 point underdog here, and then the total is 44.5. Starting with Wyoming, I'm literally going to just start and finish with Titus Swen. Everyone else is not an option for me whatsoever, but Titus Swen is going to get fed the ball. We know that last year him and Valladay were rotating a bit and splitting it. It's only going to be Swen this year as far as we can tell. So like there's a realistic chance Swen sees like 30 touches in this game. Yes, they're an underdog, but it's not like Illinois is some monstrous defense that's going to just plow them out. And if you get 30 touches at 6K, it's going to be pretty hard to be absolutely terrible. And he definitely has upside to produce with that sort of volume as well. Is there anyone else you see on Wyoming to give any consideration to, or is it just Swen for you as well?
It's probably just Swen, and the reason why his projection bumped up throughout the course of the week is their second running back, McNeely, I believe, was ruled out. So that further reinforces that Swen's going to be kind of a volume eater here, I believe. It will be interesting to see because they were pretty committed last year to splitting carries with Valladay and Swen. I think that was just because of the talent level of Swen, and they couldn't not play him. I think here he's the clear separation, so we could get he could like 20, 25 carries is definitely not out of the question here. And only 6K, that's pretty good.
I mean, I will say, here's a question for you. If I gave you $1,000 to bet on who has the most touches on this slate, you 100% bet it on Swen, correct?
Let's see. Who are the other running? Probably beats Tyler. I could see Chase Brown beating him out, but certainly Swen would be 1 or 2.
Yeah. Going over to Illinois and Chase Brown, really like Chase Brown in this game. I do think that there's going to be some touches for Josh McCray, but I think we're looking at probably 2-man backfield. I don't know how much Hayden's going to get run there. So I do like Chase Brown. I think that a big point of discussion on this slate is going to be Chase Brown versus Tyler. I will say I think that Brown has the bigger floor upside in terms of touches, and the matchup's still very fantastic. Also, the Illinois offense is going to want to pound the ball, whereas Utah State is more prone to throwing the ball. So for me, Brown probably edges Tyler a little bit, but it's really close between them. There's some other options here. One of your favorites, Tommy DeVito, is getting the start at quarterback. You're a big fan, I know. Isaiah Williams has been very good in camp. It's a rumor that Williams could be productive here. But with the offense they're running, for me, it's Chase Brown or bust here. Do you see anything differently?
No, so like I think Chase Brown's probably like the scariest fade of the slate if you're not playing him. Illinois second year over with Bielema, they brought in a new offensive coordinator, Barry Looney from UTSA, and we've seen him like run Sincere McCormick into the ground with like games of like 30, 35 carries. So like if that's a potential outcome for Brown, like I'm in on that. And I think Bielema teams generally, if they have success running the ball, they're going to keep doing it. So it kind of piles on top of each other. We could see them run the ball 40 plus times. McCray gets plenty of work as a second back, and Brown still gets his 20 to 25 carries. Isaiah Williams is very interesting, also very expensive. So I think I'm definitely have interest in him for tournaments, but I'm probably going to max one him and Brown just because they're both so expensive. I don't really see a situation where both of them have ceiling games in the same lineup. What do you think about that? It's just one of those rules where you could potentially group yourself off the nuts, but I just don't see them both being able to produce at that level. But Williams does have upside, especially if like Illinois falls behind or something, or they just have a game plan that's different than we expect.
Yeah, I think that I would probably do that. At 7,300, it's a bit difficult for both of them to produce. I will say that if I'm running Swen and if you think Wyoming can win this game, Williams is a much better play. The issue is I don't think there's going to be tons of snaps in this game, possibly because both teams are going to want to run the ball, and it's going to eat a lot of clock up. So like I just don't know how many snaps are going to be had from both teams in this game. And if we think it's like a 60-40, there might only be like I don't really see Illinois passing more than 15 to 20 times. Do you?
I mean, we just don't know with DeVito. I mean, I think they'll throw a little bit, but a lot of it'll be like gadget stuff, like pop passes to Williams, coming off motions and stuff. So that'll be interesting. Yeah, we have both of those teams around like the 65, 66 play mark, which is relatively low. Whereas like the Austin Peay, Western Kentucky teams are like in the mid 70s. So yeah, definitely a game that's lower on the play count.
For sure. All right, moving to the next game, we start with UConn. UConn has lost number 1 receiver Cam Ross due to injury thus far in the preseason. We have this game at a total of 60.5 with UConn a 27.5 point underdog, which goes to show how poor UConn is overall. But we do have some really cheap price points here for UConn. What's your thoughts here on the Huskies?
Man, I also saw something earlier this week that their defensive coordinator just left the team, and they currently do not have a defensive coordinator. So
always a great sign.
Things are always going well. Between that and Cam Ross getting hurt and going to miss the year, I don't feel as great with my UConn plus the points stand I've been making, but we'll see. We'll see how it goes. Taquan Robinson, we expect him to start. Everything's leaning towards him starting, but he's still an or situation on the depth chart. But I would imagine he gets to start. We see Robert Burns at the top of the depth chart at running back, former Miami, Florida guy. So he has some talent, but Nathan Carter will definitely get mixed in. I just think you're trying to pick off like cheap one-offs here, really, with UConn. Like I have more interest in like Burns or Clercius at receiver at the low 3K point, and just trying to pluck a one-off that can get you like 5x value on DK. So what do you think about this UConn team?
Yeah, I think Clercius and Burns are both cheap enough where you can get some production out of them. Like if you're a 3K running back and you're going to get, let's say, 15 touches, that definitely can pay off. It's honestly a decent pivot off of Robbins if you wanted to make one and you thought that some of the other UNLV backs were going to get carries. So I definitely could see Burns in some lineups as well as Clercius because 3,200 at receipt, it definitely provides some sort of value. All right, moving over to the Utah State team. We see a lot of changeover here, but we do see some returners in Logan Bonner without having to deal with the backup quarterback situation, eating into his snaps. We see Calvin Tyler, who was established as the RB1 last year. We see your boy, Brian Cobbs, the Maryland transfer, come in. And then we see the crime dog, Justin McGriff, returns. Slot situation for Utah State is a bit up in the air with Van Leeuwen, Nai Davis, and Terrell Vaughn, all listed with the 3-man or in the slot, because we saw the slot last year was really productive with Brandon Bowling. So definitely some plays here on Utah State, definitely some GPP plays. If you can get the slot play right, you could really hit gold there. For me, Bonner's probably my second favorite quarterback on the slate. We know they want to pass the ball, and he is going to be out there to throw. And with UConn's porous defense, I think they're definitely going to have some success. Calvin Tyler, again, he's definitely one of the top 2 running backs on the slate. I think it's really tight between him and Chase Brown. I slightly prefer Chase Brown as of right now. As you see, Calvin Tyler is projected by a little bit more. So I definitely could see you playing Calvin Tyler and definitely coming out as successful there. But there is other running backs like John Gentry, Makakona. Those guys are going to get some carries as well. We saw Utah State really did not want to full workhorse Calvin Tyler. We have no signs to indicate that they will this year. What's your thoughts here on Utah State?
Yeah, I will say with Tyler, he was banged up for most of the year last year. He seemed like he was in and out of a lot of games. So maybe he's fully healthy and things will be different this year. But like you said, if it ends up being a 3 or 4 touchdown game, they're certainly going to rotate running back. In terms of the slot position, like all the camp reports suggest that Van Leeuwen's going to get the first chance at having a larger share in that role. But like you said, 3-way or so they'll probably do some rotation, but he looks okay at 4,200. Cobbs and McGriff, it's hard for me to kind of the 6,800 price tag on McGriff when we're used to playing him at much cheaper than that. I know we've kind of talked, and I don't know how much of his role is going to change this year. He's going to have some ceiling games, but I'm not sure if he's a guy that's going to have that reliable floor. I feel better with Brian Cobbs in terms of like a median outcome, and he's a bit cheaper here. So I lean that way, at least initially, but certainly McGriff is in play. Bonner solid. We'll note that he partially tore his ACL in the bowl game last year, missed all of spring and had been limited in fall practice, but nothing suggests that he's anything other than a full go. So, but at least that's worth a mention that potentially they could keep him in the pocket, not tell him not to run at all, and kind of phase him out of the game faster late in the second half if they're up comfortably. But
yeah, I think for me, I slightly prefer McGriff over Cobbs, but I understand. I think one thing everyone needs to note is that last year, Devin Tompkins was just taking the top off frequently. And Brian Cobbs does not have the pace to do that, nor does McGriff. So I don't think you're going to see as many 80-yard touchdowns to Devin Tompkins type situation because they just don't have that type of receiver here. Which, to be fair, that helps everyone else as a whole because that means like when Tompkins has an 80-yard touchdown, no one else gets stats on that drive. Like it's an 80-yard touchdown, Tompkins, boom, done off the field. Whereas now, like you have to have like a 20-yard catch, a 15-yard catch, an 8-yard catch, and those type of things in a PPR setting add up and get you additional points. So, and it also spreads out that variance. So I think Cobbs and McGriff will be solid. I think the slot totally could be solid as well. And they could run 2 slot guys. So like I think those slot guys are really good GPP plays.
Yeah. Do you know who Utah State plays next week?
I do not.
They are at Alabama.
No. Good luck to them in that game because that's not going to be pretty.
I don't know if that changes anything they do here. Probably not, but it's a little bit of a look ahead spot in terms of, it's
not pretty. All right, moving on to the last game. We have Duquesne at Florida State. Big total here of 54 and a massive favorite of Florida State, about 35 points. I'll get to the Florida State side here in a second. Duquesne, not really going to touch it. They are expected to get slammed. They do have Andy Isabella's brother, Joey Isabella, here. And I do think at 3,300, you can play him if you want. They are expected to have a team total of under 10 points, which is not ideal. Do you like anyone on Duquesne at all?
I'm curious to see if like people actually click Joey Isabella just because of the name recognition. Because like if he's someone that's like 2% owned, like I could have some interest in playing him just because he's likely to see a decent target share. But like if he's someone that people are actually clicking and playing like 10% of them, like I have zero interest.
Yeah.
Really have zero interest in this team altogether. They lost a lot of pass catchers, a lot of uncertainty in terms of the wide receiver rotation. And there's plenty of 3K guys on other teams in better spots. So largely just a void for me for Duquesne.
Yep, I tend to agree. All right, on to the Florida State side of the ball. So this is the questions of the slate that people are going to have. This is the highest team total of the slate. It is higher than everyone else on the slate. However, you're going to have a lot of back-end guys get snaps and get production here because of the blowout situation, and they have a massive game next week against LSU. So I don't know how much they want to show in this game, but here's the thing, right? People are going to score touchdowns in this game for Florida State. Who they are, I don't know, because it definitely could be like Rodney Hill comes in and scores a touchdown. That doesn't help you if you're playing Trayshawn Ward at all. If you want to play any of these guys as GPP darts, totally realistic. Like I said, people are going to score. I just don't know who. The biggest person that is of question here is Jordan Travis. As we know, Jordan Travis is a huge runner. Travis is a guy that likes to take off, likes to run. I am, however, a bit worried that Travis is not going to do that here because it's a blowout and they don't want to risk any injury to him before next week. So the only sort of close simulation we have is last year against UMass, where they won 59-3. Jordan Travis threw the ball 10 times for 123 yards and ran the ball 9 times for 78 yards and a touchdown.
It's not getting it done.
That's not getting it done. You need Travis to put up 30, 35 points here to realistically get the job done, which means he probably needs 100. He probably needs 3 touchdowns and maybe 100 yards rushing. I just don't know if he's going to have that sort of rushing freedom in this game because they don't want to risk injury. What's your thoughts here with Florida State?
Yeah, so sometimes you look at a team and you're like, I don't know where the production is going to come from, but the person who produces is going to be like probably in the optimal lineup, like the Western Kentucky situation. I look at this Florida State lineup and saying like they could put up 50 points and nobody could even sniff the optimal lineup just because they have so many cooks in the kitchen at every position. Like, it's not like they just have like 2 running backs and you don't know. Like, there's legitimately 3 that are going to get a large share, and then people behind them, 4 and 5 stars behind them, who are probably going to get touches as well. Like, and then the receiver is even worse. Like, they just have so much depth that, like, through these transfers. Like, if anything, I would play someone that's very cheap that could get there on like 2 catches, like a Johnny Wilson at 4,100. So for me, like, I'm probably going to go through this team and X out most of it. Like, I might play a few Johnny Wilson at that price point, but like, I'm no interest in Helton, not paying 7,500 for Pittman. Like, Wilson might probably get the highest number of targets, but they're not going to be as high value targets as someone maybe like Wilson. Especially if people are going to play this team, like, I'm more apt to just look elsewhere. It's going to be very uncomfortable because they're the last game on the slate. So whatever you have going on into this game, there's nothing but down from there. But might just make a pretty firm stand on Florida State. Like, I could potentially X out the entire team and just hope that no one explodes for that 2 or 3 touchdown game.
Yeah, following up with what you said, I mean, of all the players here, I think my favorite play is Johnny Wilson. I can't come out and pay 7,500 for Micah Pittman because you need 25 points at 7,500 for me to really be happy with you in that situation. And you're asking a lot out of a guy that might see 3 targets. So I can't really do that. The running back. So here's the thing. As you see with the running backs here, there's about 40 points attributed to the running backs. If someone absorbs a good chunk of that, they're going to be a really good play. The issue is I cannot tell you who that's going to be because I think they're all going to play a decent amount. And especially if the game is a 40-point blowout, come the second half, you're not going to see any of them. And Ward, Toafili, Benson are going to be done. And you're going to be on the back end with like Rodney Hill. So for me, it's definitely like someone here can produce. And I think we would both agree that if you look at this team, come Saturday night, one of these guys probably had a pretty decent game. But with the inability to tell you who that's going to be, that's just a sort of a stay away spot for me. All right, that wraps up the DraftKings slates. We're going to move over to Fanduel quickly, talk about anything that is there that sort of sticks out to us in comparison to DraftKings. They do have an extra game on the slate with Charlotte and Florida Atlantic late at night. So looking at the Fanduel slate, Alex, what stands out to you that maybe is a bit different than that was on DraftKings?
So in terms of the extra game, Charlotte and FAU, Larry McCammon is 5,200 on FanDuel. He is listed as their RB1, and they said they want to kind of establish a kind of a more workhorse running back this year. They do have a new offensive coordinator, so I kind of buy that rhetoric a little bit more than I maybe typically would if it was just a off season with no changes. But 5,200 on FanDuel at running back is just extremely cheap, especially for a favored team against a poor defense. So McCammon is a really solid play there. It opens up some salary elsewhere. And then the other one that sticks out in terms of wide receiver is Joshua Simon's really cheap on FanDuel. And I think he's going to be involved and has a good chance to score a touchdown, which we know plays much better on FanDuel. So I like him on there. Those are the two that kind of jump out as differentials between the two sites.
Yeah, like as you see here, Simon is 4,500, and he is in a range of people that cost about 7K. Someone else to note is Jeff Weimer is only the min here at 4K. That's someone to note. And then the biggest differential here for me, outside of what you have talked about, is we have a few more quarterback options on this slate than we did on DraftKings. We have N'Kosi Perry. We have Chris Reynolds. With the salary savings you get from them compared to that of Bonner and Travis and even Casey Thompson, they are definitely in play as well. So you get a bit more of freedom at quarterback to pick between 6 guys instead of 4. So I think those are some of the things that I would note on FanDuel. You also do see a much bigger gap between Chase Brown and Calvin Tyler. I probably like Brown more on FanDuel than Tyler due to the price gap that we see here. A personal note that we didn't talk about because it wasn't on DraftKings. Johnny Ford is one of the biggest question marks on the slate. Fantastic GPP play. I will let you guys know that Johnny Ford's projection does not include tons of touches. The reason for that is because Ford is incredibly explosive and incredibly efficient. So if it's a situation where Ford somehow gets like 20 touches, Ford could totally end up with a 25 to 30 point game, and I would not be shocked. We don't think that's going to happen based on what they've said, but they definitely do want to get Ford the ball in space. Anything else you want to add here, Alex, before we wrap it up?
No, I think we We touched it all. It's a good appetizer. Week 1 starts next Thursday. It's going to be games Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. It's a big one. Lots of good showcase games. So excited to start with this week 0 and then jump into some big games on week 1.
Yep, definitely. Yeah, next week we'll be back. Like I said, me, Chop, and Ben will be doing the midweek show next week. Time to be determined. Saturday morning, we will have a new addition, Micah Bedard, also known as Dard Dog, and STL Cards. We'll be doing the Saturday morning show. I think we're doing it a little bit earlier this year so that it's over before the game start, to give our guys a little bit of time to adjust their lives, so you guys can have a little bit of time to adjust yours as well. So that is the plan for next week. Expect to see articles, expert surveys, CBRs as well this week and next week. So make sure you guys are on the lookout for all of that stuff as well. For Alex, I am Sean. Good luck to everyone this week. We will see you guys next week.